This offseason has been insane. Right now, it seems like we're getting huge news basically every day about major trades or acquisitions in the NFL. Some teams are preparing themselves to make a run at a championship this season, while others are more focused on building for the future. But today, I'm going to be grading every major offseason trade that we have seen so far. Now, seeing that almost every trade has been a player in exchange for a future draft pick, the grades for this video will only be created for the team that acquired the player, and not for the team that acquired the pick. Also, keep in mind we will only be focusing on the trades we have seen this offseason. The first big trade of the offseason was from the Commanders, who traded a 5th round pick to get Deebo Samuel from the 49ers. And we're gonna give this trade a solid B. Now, obviously, last season the Commanders shocked the entire NFL by making it all the way to the NFC Championship. However, in that game, they got totally outclassed by the Eagles, thanks in large part to their discrepancy in roster talent. So, their first offseason upgrade was to go get Deebo Samuel for what was kind of a steal, as all they had to give up was a 5th round pick. Now yes, Deebo is coming off one of his worst seasons in his career, as he only had 806 yards from scrimmage and 4 total touchdowns. However, this was probably because of how bad of a season the entire 49ers team had. But when Deebo is on his A game, he's probably the most versatile player in the league, and arguably the most exciting. Deebo can catch, rush, and even return, and it's that type of versatility that the Commanders' offense is desperately in need of. And that's not to mention that Deebo also brings a lot of juice to a team. He's got an infectious energy that a young team like the Commanders could really use. We might be a couple of years removed from Deebo's 2021 All-Pro season, but don't be surprised if we see flashes of that again this season, because sometimes all a player needs is a fresh start. However, there are a couple of red flags around Deebo. First off, he can kind of be a diva sometimes. Next, we have to bring up Deebo's age and health. He is 29 years old and he has suffered his fair share of injuries. Last year, he missed time early in the season with a calf injury, and then at the end of the year, he had to miss a game due to a rib injury. But I do think Deebo will be used a bit more sparingly in this Cliff Kingsbury offense, and he also won't need to do so many power-based runs. So overall, this trade easily earns a B, because if it doesn't work out, whatever. Washington will just lose a 5th round pick. But this trade also has the potential to look like a steal if Deebo is able to look like his old self again. Next up is Joe Thuney going to the Bears for a 4th round pick, but also Jonah Jackson going to the Bears for a 6th rounder as well. These are 2 separate trades, but I'm lumping them together because they're both guards going to the Chicago Bears. And as such, I'll be grading these trades as an A-. Now these trades really didn't make any headlines, but believe me, they are huge for the Bears. Last season, Chicago had arguably the worst offensive line in the entire league, and that really stunted some of Caleb Williams' growth during his rookie season. So now, both of these players will instantly make the Bears better on day one. Thuney is still arguably the best interior lineman in the league, and he is coming off back-to-back All-Pro seasons. He's also currently the lone player in the league with 4 Super Bowl wins, as he won 2 in New England and then 2 in Kansas City. Meanwhile, Jonah Jackson could end up being a sneaky good fit on the Bears as well. He's a lot younger than Thuney, but still has a ton of experience with 61 total starts. Jackson also spent 4 seasons in Detroit, including 2 in which Ben Johnson was the OC for the Lions, so there will be some built-in familiarity there. Both of these players are also pretty versatile too, as throughout their NFL careers they have both played various positions on the offensive line. Overall, there really isn't anything bad I can say about either of these trades. I guess Thuney is entering the final year of his contract, so that will be something the Bears front office will have to deal with in 2026. But all in all, I see these trades as being very helpful building blocks in both Caleb Williams' growth as a player, as well as the progression of this Bears offense. Next, we've got the Christian Kirk trade to the Texans for a 7th round pick, which I do give the grade of a C+. So the Texans are currently in a very weird spot at the receiver position. Going into last season, you could argue that they had the best receiving core in the entire league. However, injuries quickly derailed things, as both Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell both tore their ACLs. And as of right now, it doesn't seem like either of those receivers will be back in Houston for next season. So that brings us to Christian Kirk. Kirk has been on a bit of a downward trend year over year since he was in Jacksonville. He's also been fighting a lot of injuries these past 2 seasons. During his first season in Jax, he balled out, going for over 1,000 yards and scoring 8 touchdowns. But it just slowly got worse and worse each year, and with the rise of Brian Thomas Jr., it became clear that Kirk was no longer going to be their guy in Duval. He finished 2024 with career lows of 379 receiving yards and only a single touchdown all year. But now in Houston, I can see Kirk filling a similar role to what Tank Dell had, kind of a small and shifty slot receiver. He certainly won't be the one in Houston as long as Nico Collins is around, but that's okay because I'm not sure Kirk was ever really supposed to be a one. The reason I gave this trade such a low grade is because Kirk was actually set to be released by Jacksonville before this trade even went down. So the Texans kind of wasted what was, albeit a 7th round pick, to acquire him. Next is Geno Smith headed to the Raiders for a 3rd round pick. And I'm giving this trade a D-, because so far it has easily been the worst trade of the offseason. I just don't get what they're reaching for here with Smith, as he's definitely not a long-term solution, seeing that he is already 34. Since he became the starter in Seattle, Geno has been the definition of a mid-quarterback. Personally, I have him ranked as the 16th best QB in the league, and I mean, he's just not a guy that's gonna elevate your team. Sure, Geno gives you 1 or 2 breakout games a year where you might think he's a top 10 QB, but then he also gives you 3 or 4 games where he's absolutely garbage too. His stats are absolutely as polarizing as it gets, as he finished last year with a career best 4,320 yards along with 21 touchdowns, but he also threw a whopping 15 interceptions. While yes, Geno is certainly an upgrade from Minshew and O'Connell, the Raiders are still going to be the team with the 4th best quarterback in the AFC West. Giving up a 3rd rounder is just too much if you ask me, and that's why I've graded this trade so low. Next is arguably the biggest trade of the offseason, with DK Metcalf going to the Steelers for a 2nd round pick. And I gotta give this trade a solid B+. If you watched any of the Steelers games late last season, it was abundantly clear that outside of George Pickens, the offense lacked any explosiveness. But here comes the answer to the offensive troubles with the 6'4", 210-pound beast, who is also one of the fastest players in the entire league. During his tenure in Seattle, DK was almost always making highlight-type plays, even when he didn't have the ball in his hands. But we did see a bit of a regression from him last season. Maybe it was just due to a bad season, or it's what I believe, which was just that Seattle wasn't using him correctly. If you ask me, DK should be seeing at least 10 targets a game, and last year he only saw about 7 targets on average. He is entering his 7th season in the league, but I still think there's a lot of gas left in the tank. This time around, DK is not going to be the only vertical threat on his offense, as he'll have George Pickens lining up next to him, which makes for a duo that'll cause any secondary to lose sleep. If the tempers and attitudes can stay under control in Pittsburgh, this honestly could turn into the best receiving duo in the league. There's only one problem. We don't know who's going to be throwing them the ball. The quarterback situation in Pittsburgh has been a revolving door for the past 4 seasons, and we're currently unaware of who's going to be under center in 2025. Many signs are pointing towards Aaron Rodgers being the guy, but man, that would be a lot of egos clashing on one offense. This trade for DK also came with a huge contract extension worth $150 million over 5 years, which actually makes him one of the top 5 highest paid receivers in the entire league. Sure, this might be a bit of an overpay, but if DK can look like his old 2020 self, then it will be well worth it. The 2nd round pick seems fair for DK, as there's really no player coming out of college that's even equivalent to him, and you're certainly not going to find one in the 2nd round. Then we've got Devon Godchaux going from the Patriots to the Saints in exchange for a 7th round pick, and I gotta give this trade a C-. This one is definitely the most under the radar trade we have gotten so far, and I wasn't even aware it happened until I started researching for this video. But Devon requested a trade from New England during the start of the offseason, and let's face it, he doesn't seem like the type of guy Vrabel will want sticking around. The Saints are another team in a rough spot looking forward to 2025. Obviously, they're once again in a tough spot with their cap, but they're also looking for a fresh start with their new head coach and defensive coordinator. Last season, the Saints' run defense was ranked as the 2nd worst in the entire league, so there's really nowhere to go but up for Brandon Staley's new team. Devon will bring a veteran presence to this team, while also being pretty reliable as he hasn't missed a game in the past 4 seasons. I really don't have a ton to say about this trade, as it will likely end up getting swept under the rug, but I definitely think the Patriots were the real winners here. Then we've got our latest blockbuster trade with Laremy Tunsil going from Houston to Washington for a 2025 third-round pick, as well as a second and fourth-round pick in the 2026 draft. As for this trade's grade, I'm giving it a B+. Now this swap was definitely the toughest to assess in the entire video. On one hand, the Commanders finally got their QB of the future, and they definitely are going to want to protect him. But on the other, they did give up a relatively large haul to get a 30-year-old tackle. I, for one, think this is a relatively solid move by the Washington front office. They can't afford to take bigger swings, as they have Daniels currently locked in on a rookie contract. And the most important player for a young QB is his left tackle. And over the years, Tunsil has consistently been one of the best in the entire league. During the past 3 seasons, Tunsil has had the second lowest pressure rate allowed in the entire NFL with an impressive 3.1%. It's quite evident that the Commanders are ready to win now, as they're willing to give up a lot of draft capital to load up their roster with current stars. The only skepticism I have about this trade is 1. Tunsil's age, 2. The draft haul the Commanders had to give up, and 3. Tunsil will be due for a new contract soon, and it's more than likely going to be pretty expensive. However, if you can get your young quarterback a reliable tackle for years to come, then you're not really going to see any pushback from fans. It is so refreshing to see Washington finally acting like a competent team, and I'm ready to see them continue to move forward as an organization. We do have another trade, but by no means is it a blockbuster. The Browns traded Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a 5th-round pick to the Eagles in exchange for Kenny Pickett. This trade receives an absolute F. It's equivalent to trading a piece of garbage for a hot pile of crap. But at least Kenny Pickett can tell the Browns what it's like to win a Super Bowl. And then finally, the very latest trade in the NFL is CJ Garner Johnson and a 2026 round pick going to Houston for Kenyon Green and a 2026 5th-round pick. As for my grades for this one, I give the Texans a B+, and I give the Eagles a D. From the perspective of the Texans, this was a really good move, and it makes that Laremy Tunsil trade hurt a bit less. CJ will bring his veteran experience to a young but impressive Houston secondary. Even though he is getting a bit old, he obviously still has a lot of good ball left in him. I mean, last year alone, he had 6 interceptions and was an absolute force on that Eagles secondary. Overall, this really seems like a good move for the Texans, as they're really just giving up an alright offensive guard for a solid veteran defensive back. But as for the Eagles, this was a stupid move. Something we're not really used to seeing from Howie Roseman. CJ Garner Johnson was the heart and soul of that Eagles secondary, and I don't really understand why they keep moving off of him. He was also with the team during their amazing 2022 season, but then got cut before 2023, only to then return again in 2024. And those 2 seasons he was with the Eagles, he had 6 interceptions each year. As we all know, this Eagles secondary is probably the best in the entire NFL, but with DeJean and Mitchell, they are still pretty young. So I don't think it was really all that smart to trade away your veteran leader in CJ. I mean, maybe this could have been due to some off-the-field issues, but still, it doesn't seem like they received super fair compensation. It all just doesn't seem worth it to me. Well, those are just my rankings of every offseason trade we have seen so far. With how fast things are moving this year, I'm sure this video will become outdated relatively quickly. So be sure to update me with your grades of any trades that have happened since I've posted this video in the comments section below. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to drop a big like on this video and smash that subscribe button for more NFL content.